He was a Navy SEAL, yet he chose to live in isolation, in an abandoned house in the middle of a frozen lake. He didn't go there to start over. He went there to escape memories that never truly left him. There was only one living soul that never walked away, a German shepherd who quietly watched everything around him. Then, when he stepped into town,
I don't know him. Who is that
he
guy?
began to feel the way people looked at him.
We should watch
Something
him.
about it wasn't normal. The days that followed passed in silence, until the dog started reacting to something he couldn't see, as if the place he chose to disappear had never truly intended to let him go. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Help us reach 1,000 followers so we can continue sharing meaningful stories. Now, let's begin. The lake stretched wide and silent beneath a sky so pale it looked unfinished. North Wake did not glitter like the postcards. It did not charm or welcome. It simply existed, cold, still, and indifferent. In early winter, when the first thin sheets of ice began to form along its edges, the surface turned into something deceptive. Not solid enough to trust, not fluid enough to move. A place caught between states. Darren Cole understood that better than most. He parked his aging pickup truck at the end of the narrow access road and cut the engine. The sudden quiet pressed in around him, thick and immediate, like stepping into deep water. For a moment, he didn't move. Beside him, Rex lifted his head. The German shepherd was 6 years old, built lean and powerful rather than bulky. His coat shifted in layers of sable black along the spine, fading into gray and warm cream toward his legs and chest. His ears stood alert even in stillness, and his amber-brown eyes didn't wander. They watched. Always. Rex didn't bark. He never barked without reason. Darren reached out and scratched behind the dog's ear, fingers brushing through thick winter fur. "Yeah," he murmured, voice low, rough from disuse. "This is it." The dog didn't respond, only blinked once, slow, as if acknowledging a decision already made. Ahead of them, beyond a narrow wooden bridge that creaked even in the wind, stood Aurora House. It wasn't large, not even close. A single-story structure built from weathered timber, gray with age and exposure. The roof sagged slightly toward the north side, and one of the shutters hung crooked, tapping faintly against the wall whenever the breeze picked up. Snow dusted the edges of the porch, untouched, as if no one had stood there in years. The place had a reputation. People in town called it the Cold House. Others said it was unlucky. A man had drowned not far from the bridge a decade ago, ice breaking beneath him before anyone could reach him. After that, the property sat empty. Too isolated, too inconvenient, too quiet. That was exactly why Darren bought it. Cheap, forgotten, avoided. No one came here unless they had a reason, and Darren didn't want to give anyone one. The bridge groaned under his boots as he crossed it, the sound sharp in the otherwise endless quiet. Each plank flexed slightly beneath his weight, the wood stiff from cold and age. Rex moved ahead of him, confident, balanced, placing each paw with practiced precision. Halfway across, Darren paused, not because of fear, because of habit. He scanned the horizon tree line, shoreline, open ice, measured distances, checked angles, calculated without thinking. There was no threat. There hadn't been one in months. Still, his body didn't believe that. It never would. He exhaled slowly and kept walking. Inside, Aurora House smelled of dust, old wood, and something faintly metallic beneath it all, like cold iron or damp nails. The air was stale, but not rotten. Preserved, almost. Darren set his duffel down near the wall, but didn't unpack. He moved through the space methodically. Kitchen first. One window, half frosted. Counter warped, but usable. Old sink. Pipes probably frozen or broken. Living area. Small. A stone fireplace that might still function. A few chairs stacked in a corner, one missing a leg. Bedroom. Just enough space for a narrow bed. No mattress. Bathroom. Useless for now. He catalogued everything quickly, efficiently, like he used to do with unfamiliar buildings overseas. Entry points. Structural weaknesses. Blind spots. Except this time there was no mission. No objective. Just time. Rex padded in behind him, nails clicking softly on the wooden floor. The dog circled once, then stopped near the center of the room. His ears tilted forward. His head turned not toward Darren, not toward the door, but toward the far wall facing the lake. He stood there longer than necessary. Still. Listening. Darren watched him for a moment. Nothing there, he said quietly. Rex didn't move. For a second, something tightened in Darren's chest. Not fear, not quite, but a subtle awareness, the kind that used to come before things went wrong. Then the dog blinked, relaxed, and turned away. Just like that. False alarm. Probably. Darren didn't comment. He just moved on. He spent the next few hours working. Not because the house needed immediate repair, though it did, but because stopping meant thinking. And thinking meant remembering. He checked the generator outside. Old, but salvageable. Cleaned the intake, adjusted a loose connection, tested the pull cord. It coughed once, twice, then roared to life. The sound shattered the silence, echoing faintly across the lake before fading into the distance. For the first time since arriving, the place felt inhabited. Darren shut it off after a minute. No need to waste fuel. Not yet. He gathered fallen branches from near the shoreline, selecting only the driest pieces, testing each one by feel rather than sight. Rex followed, occasionally darting ahead, occasionally pausing to sniff at patches of snow where small animals had passed. Once, the dog froze. Not like before. This time, sharper. Intent. Rex stepped toward the edge of the lake, paws stopping just short of the thin ice. He lowered his head, sniffed, then looked up. Not at Darren. Outward. Across the water. Darren followed his gaze. There was nothing there. Just a stretch of gray-white surface, broken in places where darker water showed through. The wind brushed across it, whispering faintly, carrying no clear sound. "Rex!" Darren called. The dog didn't move. For a moment, a brief, strange moment, Darren thought he saw something shift beneath the ice. Not a shape, not a figure, just a subtle distortion, like the surface had exhaled. He blinked. It was gone. Rex let out a low, almost inaudible rumble in his chest. Then, as suddenly as it began, the tension dissolved. The dog stepped back, shook himself lightly, and trotted toward Darren as if nothing had happened. Darren stood there a second longer than he meant to. Then he turned away. whatever he thought he saw. The lake kept it. And the day moved on. By late afternoon, the light began to change. The sky deepened from pale blue to something colder, sharper. Shadows stretched longer across the frozen edges of the lake, and the air carried that subtle shift that came just before night in the north cleaner, thinner, almost metallic. Darren lit the fireplace after clearing it out, stacking wood carefully, building the flame slowly instead of rushing it. The heat came gradually, filling the small room in uneven waves. Rex settled near the hearth, lying on his side but not fully relaxed. One ear remained angled toward the door. Always listening. Darren sat on the floor instead of the chair, back against the wall, close enough to the fire to feel it, far enough to stay alert. He stared into the flames, watching the way they moved, unpredictable, alive, consuming everything they touched and turning it into something quieter. Ash. He knew that feeling. 2 years ago, he had stood in a place far louder than this. Different country, different climate, same cold. Not from weather. From the moment everything went wrong. He had followed protocol, made the call he was trained to make, calculated risk, weighed options, acted. And someone didn't come back. No one said it was his fault. They didn't have to. Silence could accuse just as well as words. After that, things unraveled quietly. Sleep became unreliable. Conversations became shorter. The space between him and everyone else widened. Until there was no one left close enough to notice. Or maybe they did notice, and didn't know what to do. Darren didn't blame them. He wouldn't have known either. The fire crackled softly. Rex shifted closer, pressing his side lightly against Darren's leg. Not demanding attention. Just there. Darren rested his hand on the dog's back, fingers tracing the familiar line of muscle beneath fur. "You're still here," he said, almost to himself. Rex didn't move. Didn't need to. Some presences didn't require answers. Outside, the wind picked up slightly, brushing across the lake and through the trees along the far shoreline. The sound carried differently out here, longer, stretched, as if it had more space to exist. Darren listened. Not for danger. Not anymore. Just listening. The house creaked once, settling. The bridge groaned faintly in the distance. And beneath it all, the lake remained. Still. Waiting. Darren leaned his head back against the wall and closed his eyes. Not asleep, not fully awake. Just suspended. For the first time in a long while, no one needed anything from him. No decisions, no consequences, no lives balanced on seconds, just a house, a fire, a dog, and the quiet. But even in that quiet, something lingered. Not threatening, not urgent, just present. Like a question the world hadn't asked yet. Rex lifted his head once more, eyes opening slowly. He looked toward the door, toward the bridge, toward the place where, sooner or later, someone would come. Darren didn't notice, not yet. Outside, the last light faded from the lake, and Aurora House stood alone in the dark, no longer empty, but not entirely at rest. Morning came without ceremony. No alarms, no voices, no distant traffic humming like a restless animal beneath the surface of the world. Just light thin and pale slipping slowly across the frozen edge of the lake and pressing itself against the windows of Aurora House. Darren Cole was already awake. He had not slept much. he rarely did. Sleep, for him, was not a place of rest. It was a corridor of unfinished things, half-remembered sounds, faces without closure, decisions that replayed with cruel precision. So he learned to live on less of it, function without it. Move through the day like a man who had trained himself to survive without comfort. He sat on the edge of the narrow bed he had assembled from salvaged boards the night before. The room still held the chill of early morning. His breath formed faint clouds in the air. Across the room, Rex was already standing. The German Shepherd didn't stretch lazily the way most dogs did. There was no softness in his waking. He rose in one smooth motion, weight balanced, head slightly lowered, as if already reading the room before committing to movement. 6 years old, Darren reminded himself again, but built like something that had never forgotten its purpose. Rex glanced at him once, amber eyes steady, then turned toward the door. Not impatient, just ready. Darren pulled on his boots, the leather stiff from cold, and stepped outside. The lake had changed overnight, not dramatically, but enough. The thin ice that had hugged the shoreline yesterday had spread further out, forming uneven patches that caught the morning light and fractured it into dull reflections. Between those frozen sections, dark water still breathed slowly, almost invisibly. Darren stood at the edge of the porch, scanning. Wind direction, light northwest. Visibility, clear. Surface conditions, unstable. He cataloged it all without thinking. Old habits didn't fade. They settled into the bones and waited. Rex moved ahead of him, stepping carefully along the packed snow near the house. His nose dipped low, tracing invisible paths. Every few seconds, he paused, listening, recalibrating. Darren watched him work. There was something grounding about it. A system. A logic. A purpose. Things Darren himself was still trying to remember how to hold on to. He spent the morning repairing the bridge. Not because it was urgent, because it gave him something to do. The wooden planks had warped over time, some splitting at the edges. He replaced what he could, reinforcing the weakest sections with salvaged boards from the shed behind the house. Each hammer strike echoed across the lake, sharp, clean, final. The sound felt good, not loud, not chaotic, controlled. Rex stayed nearby, occasionally trotting back toward the house, then returning as if checking a perimeter no one had assigned him. At one point, the dog stopped mid-step, his ears lifted, his body stilled. Darren noticed immediately. "What is it?" No answer, of course. Rex didn't bark. He turned his head slightly, not toward the open lake this time, but toward the distant shoreline where a narrow road cut through the trees. Darren followed his gaze. Nothing moved. No vehicles. No figures. Just trees standing quiet beneath a thin layer of frost. After a moment, Rex relaxed. He exhaled, almost inaudibly, and resumed pacing. Darren didn't question it. Not yet. By midday, he made the drive into town. The road curved along the lake before cutting inland, narrowing into something closer to a path than a proper route. Snow gathered at the edges, untouched except for the occasional tire track. The town itself, if it could be called that, was small. A handful of buildings clustered around a central road, a general store, a gas station that looked like it hadn't changed in 20 years, a diner with fogged windows and a flickering sign. Darren parked near the general store. Rex stayed in the truck, watching, always watching. Inside, the air was warmer thick with the smell of wood, fabric, and something faintly sweet. Maeve Rowan stood behind the counter. She was a woman in her early 40s, tall around 5'8", with a build that spoke of years of physical work rather than careful maintenance. Her dark brown hair was tied loosely at the back, strands escaping near her temples. Her skin carried the pale tone of someone who spent winters indoors, but not sheltered from them. There were faint lines at the corners of her eyes, not from age alone, but from squinting into cold wind. Her eyes were sharp, not unfriendly, but not soft either. They flicked up as Darren entered, took him in, measured. "You're the one who bought the lake house," she said. It wasn't a question. Darren nodded once. "That's right." Maeve studied him a moment longer. Her gaze lingered. Not on his face, but on the way he stood. The way his shoulders settled. The stillness in his posture. People who had lived ordinary lives didn't stand like that. "You'll need more than nails and wood out there," she said finally, turning to pull a coil of rope from behind the counter. "Generator fuel too, and filters if you plan on using the lake." Darren stepped closer. "I'll take those." She set them down, didn't smile, didn't need to. "You alone?" she asked. Darren hesitated, just slightly. "Me and the dog." Maeve nodded once. "That's something at least." As Darren paid, Maeve's eyes shifted past him toward the window. Her expression changed. Subtle, quick, but not invisible. "Your dog," she said. Darren turned. Through the glass, Rex stood in the bed of the truck, front paws braced against the edge. Not barking, not moving, just staring fixed at something across the road. Darren followed the line of his gaze. A man stood near the far side of the street, broad-shouldered, heavy build, wearing a faded red rescue jacket that had seen better years. His hair was graying at the temples, cut short but uneven, like he didn't care much for appearances. His face was lined not just with age, but with something harder. Experience. Friction. He wasn't looking at Darren. He was looking at the dog. And something in that look wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. Or maybe judgment. Then the man turned and walked away. Just like that. The moment broke, but it didn't disappear. Maeve leaned slightly against the counter. "That's Gareth Pike," she said. Darren waited. "Used to run rescue out here," she continued, "before they cut funding. Still thinks the lake belongs to him." There was no bitterness in her tone, just fact. Darren glanced once more toward the road. Gareth was already gone. Rex had settled back down. But the air felt different, like something had shifted a few inches out of place. The drive back was quieter, not because anything had changed, but because Darren noticed more. The bend in the road where visibility dropped. The stretch of trees where sound seemed to carry oddly. The open section of lake where wind moved differently. And the feeling subtle but present that he was no longer entirely unnoticed. Back at Aurora House, the afternoon light had begun to fade again. Rex jumped down from the truck and immediately circled the perimeter of the house, nose low, movements sharper than before. Darren carried supplies inside. Set them down. Listened. The house creaked once. Wind pressed gently against the walls. Nothing unusual. And yet, he stepped back outside. Rex stood near the edge of the bridge now. Not tense, not alarmed, but alert. Waiting. Darren approached slowly. "What is it?" The dog didn't look at him, didn't move, just held his position, eyes fixed toward the path leading back to the road, the same direction as before, the same silent question. Darren stood beside him, looked out. There was nothing there. No movement. No sound. Just the long stretch of cold air between the house and the world beyond it. He stayed there longer than necessary, then finally exhaled and stepped back. "Come on." Rex hesitated, just for a second, then followed. Inside, Darren set the generator running again, long enough to test the wiring, check the output, confirm the system would hold through colder nights. The hum filled the space. Not comforting, but steady, reliable. Something he could depend on. Unlike most things. As darkness settled fully over the lake, Darren sat near the fire again. Same position, same stillness. But something had shifted. Not in the house, not in the lake. In him. A small awareness. A faint return of something he hadn't felt in a while. Not purpose, not yet. But attention. The world, it seemed, had begun to notice him. And in return, he was starting to notice it back. Rex lay near the door, head resting on his paws, eyes open. Watching. Always watching. The fog came in before dawn. Not drifting, not creeping, settling. It pressed itself across Northwake Lake like a second surface, softening every edge, swallowing distance until the world narrowed to whatever stood within a few yards. Aurora House woke inside it. Darren Cole stood on the porch, breath slow, shoulders still. The cold bit deeper today, slipping through layers, finding skin without asking permission. The lake had vanished. Where there had been water, ice, and horizon, there was now only white. Rex stood ahead of him. The German shepherd's body was angled forward, weight balanced on his front paws, head slightly lowered. His ears were not just alert, they were tuned. Listening into something the fog carried but refused to reveal. Darren didn't speak. He had learned that silence mattered more than questions. The world had changed overnight, and Rex had noticed first. Of course he had. Darren stepped off the porch and onto the narrow strip of packed snow that bordered the house. The fog dampened sound, turning even his boots into muted thuds. It felt like walking inside something alive, something that absorbed everything and gave nothing back. Rex moved ahead, slow at first. Not the confident patrol from the day before. This was different. Measured. Deliberate. Every step tested. Darren followed, eyes scanning automatically left, right, forward searching for structure in a world that had none. There was no wind. That was the first thing he noticed. No movement in the air. No whisper across the lake. Just stillness. Stillness like held breath. Then Rex stopped, not near the house, not near the trees, closer to the bridge. He didn't turn back this time, didn't look to Darren for confirmation. He just fixed. Every line of his body pointed forward. And then, a sound. Faint. So faint Darren almost missed it. A break in the silence. Not loud, not sharp, just wrong. Like something where nothing should be. Darren's posture changed instantly. His body shifted, not visibly, but internally into something older, sharper, every muscle aligned with purpose. He stepped forward, listened. There it was again. A small, irregular noise. Human. Rex moved first, not running too controlled for that, but faster now, threading through the fog toward the bridge. Darren followed, pace quickening, breath steady despite the cold biting his lungs. The wooden planks creaked beneath his weight as he crossed. Halfway over, visibility dropped even further. The far end of the bridge disappeared into white. The sound came again. Closer now. A choking breath. A wet cough. Darren's mind locked onto it. Direction, distance, time. He stepped off the bridge onto the frozen edge of the lake and saw it, a dark shape against the pale. A small fishing boat tipped sideways, half submerged where the ice had failed to hold. One side caught in a jagged edge of frozen water, the other dipping dangerously into black. And a man, clinging to the hull. Bare hands gripping wood, slick with frost. His body half in the water, legs submerged, movements slow, too slow. Hypothermia. Advanced. Darren didn't hesitate. He dropped his pack, uncoiled the rope from his shoulder in one practiced motion, and secured it around a support beam at the edge of the bridge. His fingers moved without thought, tying knots that had once been muscle memory, but now felt like instinct reborn. Rex, stay. The command came low, firm. Rex didn't argue. He stepped back, but didn't retreat far. His body remained coiled, ready, eyes locked on Darren. Watching. Always watching. The ice cracked under Darren's weight as he moved forward. Not fully braking, but protesting. Each step calculated. Distributed. Controlled. The cold seeped through his boots instantly, biting upward. Warning. He ignored it. Focus narrowed. The man's head dipped, slipped, then jerked back up weakly. Not much time. Darren reached him. Hey, stay with me. The man's eyes fluttered open. They were pale, clouded, struggling to focus. He was older, late 50s, maybe early 60s. Weathered skin, gray stubble along his jaw, hair thinning and matted with frost. His build suggested someone who had spent years working outdoors, strong once, now failing under cold. His lips moved. No sound came out. Darren secured the rope around him. Tight, efficient, no wasted motion. Then he shifted his weight, braced, and began to pull. For a split second, as Darren leaned back and the rope went taut, the man's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. Not weakly, not randomly, deliberately. His eyes locked onto Darren's. Clearer now. Desperate. And for just a moment, just a breath, the man didn't look like someone dying. He looked like someone recognizing something, as if he had been waiting. Then the strength vanished. His grip loosened, and the moment was gone. Darren pulled, harder now. The rope strained, fibers tightening, biting into his gloves. His boots slipped. Once ice, shifting beneath him. But he adjusted instantly, lowering his center of gravity, compensating. Behind him, Rex paced along the edge of the ice, whining softly, not panicked, but strained. His body mirrored Darren's effort, tension running through him as if he, too, were pulling. Inch by inch, the man moved. Water dragged at him, heavy, resisting. Cold fought back. Darren didn't think, didn't feel. He acted. When the man finally cleared the edge of the broken ice, Darren grabbed him under the arms and hauled him fully onto the frozen surface, then dragged him backward toward the bridge. The ice groaned, but held. Once they reached solid ground, Darren moved fast. He laid the man flat, checked his airway, his pulse, weak. But there. "Stay with me," Darren said again, though he wasn't sure if the man could hear. He removed his gloves, ignoring the sting of cold, and began compressions, steady, controlled. Then breaths. Again. Rex stood close now, circling once, then stopping at the man's side. His nose pressed lightly against the man's sleeve, sniffing, confirming life, or searching for it. The man coughed. Water spilled from his mouth. His chest jerked. Then again. And again Darren leaned back slightly. Watching. Waiting. The man's eyes opened this time with more awareness. Not fully present. But here, alive. He grabbed Darren's arm, weaker now, but still intentional. "Thank you." The words came out broken, dragged through cold and exhaustion. Darren didn't respond, not right away. He just looked at him, then nodded once. Sharp, controlled. They stayed there for a moment, man breathing, dog watching, lake silent again, as if nothing had happened. Later, inside Aurora House, the man sat wrapped in blankets near the fire. His name was Harold Bennett. He spoke in pieces fragments of explanation between shivers. He had gone out early, thinking the ice was thick enough near the edge. Done it before. Knew the lake, or thought he did. Darren didn't correct him, didn't offer advice, just handed him a cup of hot water and monitored his breathing. Harold's hands trembled as he held the cup. "You live out here?" he asked. Darren nodded. "Just moved in." Harold let out a weak, humorless laugh. "Hell of a place to pick." Darren didn't disagree. Rex lay nearby, head resting on his paws, but his eyes remained on Harold. Not suspicious, not trusting, just assessing. After a while, Harold's breathing steadied. Color returned slowly to his face. He looked at Darren again. Longer this time, like he was trying to understand something. "You didn't even think," he said quietly. "You just moved." Darren looked toward the fire. "No," he said. "I didn't." When Harold finally left, helped back to his truck once the fog began to lift, the house fell quiet again. Just like before, but not the same. Darren stood in the doorway, watching the distant shape of the vehicle disappear into the thinning white. Rex stood beside him, closer than usual. Not out of need, out of choice. Darren exhaled slowly. Something had shifted. Not outside. Inside. A small fracture in the stillness he had built around himself. He felt it. Didn't understand it. Didn't trust it. But it was there. He closed the door, turned back toward the fire. And for the first time since arriving, he didn't feel entirely removed from the world beyond the lake. Morning did not arrive in silence anymore. It came with sound faint, distant, but undeniable. Tires rolling over gravel somewhere beyond the trees. A door closing far off across the lake. The kind of noise that didn't belong to wilderness, but to people. Darren Cole stood by the window, fingers resting lightly against the cold wooden frame, listening without moving the curtain. He didn't need to see. The lake carried sound clean and direct, as if the world had decided to whisper instead of speak. Someone was out there. Maybe more than one. Rex was already awake. The German shepherd stood near the door, body angled forward, ears lifted. Not tense, but tuned. His posture wasn't defensive. It was attentive, the kind that suggested something had shifted in the pattern of things. Darren turned away from the window, pulled on his boots, and stepped outside. The cold met him immediately, sharp and honest, settling into his skin like something familiar. The fog from the previous day had vanished. Northwake Lake stretched open again, its surface fractured between thin ice and dark water. But what caught Darren's attention wasn't the lake. It was the ground. Footprints. Faint but clear, they led from the far end of the bridge toward the house, small, uneven, light. Darren crouched, studying them. Not deep enough for an adult. Too close together. A child. He straightened slowly, eyes narrowing just slightly, not in suspicion, but in recalculation. Rex stepped forward, nose lowering, following the trail with quiet certainty. There was no tension in him, no warning. Just curiosity. The tracks led along the side of the house. Then they stopped. Not faded, not scattered. Stopped. As if whoever had come this far had simply decided not to go any closer. Darren turned his head slightly, scanning the open space around him. No movement, no sound. Just the lake and the air, and the stillness that was no longer entirely empty. Then Rex shifted. His ears lifted again, sharper this time. Darren followed his gaze. A small figure appeared at the far end of the bridge. She moved carefully, arms slightly out to balance, boots testing each plank before committing weight. A girl 10, maybe 11. Thin, almost swallowed by the oversized blue parka she wore. The sleeves hung too long past her wrists, and her boots, though sturdy, had clearly been worn through more than one winter. A gray knit hat sat low over her head, loose threads trailing from one side. Strands of light brown hair escaped near her temples, catching the cold air. She stopped halfway across. Not afraid. Just watching. Darren didn't move. He let her decide. After a moment, she continued, slower now, until she stepped off the bridge and onto the snow. Up close, her face was sharper than her size suggested, pale from the cold, cheeks flushed red, eyes bright and steady. Hazel, Darren thought, but there was something older behind them. Awareness. The kind that came from growing up in places where explanations were optional and silence taught more than words. "You're the one who lives here now," she said. Not a question. Darren nodded once. "That's right." Her gaze moved past him, taking in the house, the porch, the tools stacked neatly near the wall. Then it shifted to Rex. The dog stood still, watching her with the same measured calm he gave everything unfamiliar. No growl, no retreat, just presence. The girl stepped closer, slowly, then crouched. "Hey," she said softly. Rex tilted his head slightly, studying her. Then, after a pause that felt longer than it was, he stepped forward and allowed her hand to rest against his neck. Darren noticed that. Rex didn't offer trust easily. It was given in pieces, and only when something in the other person made sense. "My name's Nora," she said, still focused on the dog. "Nora Bell." Darren filed the name away. Bell. He had heard it before, somewhere in the background of town conversations that didn't concern him until now. "I'm Darren," she nodded, as if confirming something she already knew. "I know." Of course she did. Small places didn't allow strangers to stay unknown for long. Nora's hand moved slowly through Rex's fur, fingers tracing the thick sable coat, as if memorizing it. Then she paused. Her expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough for Darren to catch it. Her eyes lifted, not toward him, but past him, toward the open stretch of lake. "You hear that?" she asked. Darren listened. There was nothing. Just the same wide silence. "No," he said. Nora frowned slightly, her head tilting as if trying to catch the sound again. "It's like tapping," she murmured, uncertain now. Rex's ears flicked once, a subtle reaction that lasted less than a second. Then he stilled again, as if whatever had brushed the edge of his awareness had already passed. Nora shook her head lightly. "Probably nothing." But she didn't sound convinced. She stood and brushed snow from her gloves, shifting her weight like someone who wasn't used to staying still for long. "Mr. Bennett told everyone," she said, "about what you did." Darren didn't respond. The words sat between them, but he didn't reach for them. Nora didn't push. She simply accepted the silence the way people here seem to accept weather present, but not something to argue with. "You fixed the bridge," she added, glancing back over her shoulder. "Some of it." She nodded once, approving in a quiet, practical way that didn't need elaboration. The sound of an engine cut through the air, then low, steady, approaching. Darren turned slightly as a vehicle came into view along the narrow access road. Maeve Rowan stepped out, pulling her coat tighter against the cold. She looked the same as before, tall, grounded, composed, but her eyes moved differently now. Sharper, more aware. They flicked from Darren to Nora, then to Rex, then back again. "So it's true," she said. "You're not planning to stay invisible out here." Darren leaned lightly against the porch railing. "I didn't say that." Maeve glanced at Nora. "You shouldn't be out here alone." "I know the lake," Nora replied, a hint of defiance in her tone. Maeve didn't argue. She didn't need to. The look she gave the girl carried more weight than words. Then she turned back to Darren. "Bennett's talking," she said, "and people listen when a man almost dies, and then doesn't." Darren held her gaze for a moment. There was no accusation in it, no expectation, just observation. "You planning to keep doing that?" she asked. Darren didn't answer right away. Not because he didn't have one, but because the question wasn't about action. It was about direction. About whether he was still the kind of man who moved toward something when it needed to be done. "I didn't plan anything," he said finally. Maeve nodded slowly. That's usually how it starts. Nora had drifted toward the side of the house again, crouching near the snow. Rex followed, not leading, not guarding, just present. She pointed to a set of marks partially hidden beneath a thin layer of frost. "These weren't mine," she said quietly. Darren stepped closer. The tracks were older, less defined, but still there. Different direction, different stride. He studied them in silence. Someone had been here before, more than once. Maeve watched him from a distance, her expression unreadable. "You picked an interesting place," she said. Darren didn't disagree. He simply looked out across the lake, at the wide stretch of cold light and shadow that no longer felt entirely empty. By late afternoon, the sky had begun to fade again, pulling color out of the world 1 degree at a time. Nora eventually stood, brushing off her knees, and made her way back toward the bridge. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't need to. The way she moved, careful, steady, familiar, suggested this wasn't the last time. Maeve left not long after, her vehicle disappearing into the trees. And just like that, the lake returned to quiet. But it wasn't the same quiet. Darren stood on the porch, hands resting against the worn wood, eyes fixed on the horizon that stretched beyond the visible edge of things. Rex sat beside him, closer than before, not out of need, out of choice. The air held something now, not noise, not movement, but presence. Footsteps had come and gone, voices had crossed the bridge, and something in Darren, something small, something he hadn't been willing to name, had shifted. He exhaled slowly, the cold filling his lungs. He had come here to disappear, but the world had found him anyway. And for the first time, he didn't step back. The lake did not change overnight, but Darren Cole had begun to notice the parts of it that never stayed still. Morning came in a pale stretch of gray light, thin and cold, laying itself quietly over Northwake without asking permission. He stepped out onto the porch with the same measured stillness he carried into everything now, boots settling against the wood, breath slow, eyes already scanning. Rex was ahead of him, not running, not pacing, but moving in a wider circle than usual, nose low, body balanced, as if the space around the house had grown larger overnight and needed to be re-understood. The tracks from yesterday were still there, softened but not erased. Nora's smaller prints fading into the frost while the older ones lingered beneath them, less visible but somehow more persistent, like something the ground refused to let go of. Darren crouched briefly, studying them without touching, then stood again, his gaze drifting toward the lake. It looked the same. That was the problem. He worked along the shoreline through the late morning, driving short wooden stakes into the snow and ice to mark where the surface held and where it didn't. It wasn't precise science. No map could guarantee safety out here, but it created a boundary, something visible, something that might stop someone before they stepped too far. He didn't think about who that someone would be. He didn't ask himself why he was doing it. His hands simply moved, measured, and controlled, each strike of the hammer echoing faintly across the water. Rex stayed near, stepping occasionally onto the ice, testing it with careful pressure before shifting back, his movements slower today, more deliberate, as if he, too, had begun to understand that this place had layers that didn't show themselves all at once. Darren noticed the difference. He always noticed. By midday, the air carried a sound that didn't belong to the lake. An engine, low and steady, approaching without hurry. Darren didn't turn immediately. He already knew someone was coming. Rex had stopped moving, ears lifted, body angled slightly toward the access road. Recognition, not alarm. That told Darren enough. He straightened, brushing snow from his hands as the truck came into view. A dark, older pickup, paint dulled by years of weather, moving with the kind of familiarity that suggested it had taken this road many times before. It rolled to a stop without drama, and the door opened. Gareth Pike stepped out like a man who didn't waste energy on appearances. Up close, he was broader than Darren had first thought, shoulders heavy, frame built not from training but from repetition lifting, hauling, enduring. His red rescue jacket had faded into something rougher, the color worn thin at the edges, seams stretched in places that told their own story of years in the cold. His hair, cut unevenly, carried streaks of gray through darker strands, and the stubble along his jaw wasn't styled or neglected. It simply existed, like everything else about him. His face held the kind of weight that didn't come from age alone. It came from things that had stayed too long without resolution. He closed the truck door and let his eyes move first to the lake, then to Darren, then finally to Rex, where they lingered just a second longer. "Dog's sharp," he said, voice low, worn down rather than raised. Darren gave a small nod. "He is." Gareth stepped closer, boots pressing into the snow with a steady rhythm. Not fast, not slow, just certain. "He's not just a pet," he added. Darren didn't answer. He didn't need to. Gareth's expression shifted slightly, something like understanding passing through it before settling again. "Didn't think so." They stood there without filling the space with unnecessary words. It wasn't uncomfortable. It wasn't friendly. It was something in between two men who understood distance without needing to step away from each other. Gareth's gaze moved across the house, then toward the shoreline, then back again, taking in the stakes Darren had set. "You marked the ice?" Darren nodded once. "Yeah." Gareth gave a short acknowledgement. "Good." The moment stretched, quiet, but not empty, until Gareth's attention shifted again, sharper this time, his eyes narrowing slightly as they moved toward the lake. Rex reacted at the same instant, his body stilling, ears lifting just enough to catch something Darren hadn't yet seen. Gareth took a step forward. "You see that?" he asked. Darren followed the line of his gaze, focusing on the uneven surface where ice met water. At first there was nothing. Then a subtle disturbance, barely more than a shift, moved across the surface in a way that didn't follow the wind or the current. It wasn't large, it wasn't dramatic, but it was wrong. Darren held his focus, waiting for it to repeat, to reveal itself, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving the lake still again, as if it had never been touched. Gareth exhaled slowly. "Yeah," he muttered, almost to himself. "Thought so." Rex's ears lowered slightly, not in fear, but in recognition of something that had already passed beyond reach. Neither of them spoke about it. Some things didn't need explanation to exist. Gareth turned back toward Darren, expression settling again. "Bennett got lucky," he said. "Not a lot of people come back from that water this time of year." Darren shrugged slightly. He was close enough. Gareth's eyes held his for a moment. "That's not what I meant." The words hung there, heavier than they sounded, before Gareth looked away again. "I used to pull people out of that lake," he continued, voice quieter now, less guarded. "Before they cut the program. Before it stopped being anyone's responsibility." There was no bitterness in the way he said it, just fact. But beneath that fact was something else, something unresolved, something that hadn't been given a place to settle. Darren understood that kind of weight without needing it explained. Gareth looked out across the water again, eyes tracing the same lines Darren had begun to memorize. "You planning to stay through winter?" Darren answered simply. "Yeah." Gareth nodded once. "Then you'll see things change." Darren didn't ask how. Gareth hesitated briefly, then shook his head. "You'll figure it out." Rex moved then, stepping closer to Gareth, not cautiously, not boldly, just closing the space as if something about the man had already been decided. Gareth looked down at him, and for a brief moment something in his face softened. Not enough to change him, but enough to show it was still there. He reached out, resting his hand lightly against the dog's head, fingers pressing into the thick fur with a familiarity that suggested he had done this before, with other dogs, other moments, other lives. "Good animal," he said quietly. Rex didn't lean into the touch, but he didn't pull away either. He accepted it, the way he accepted most things, without excess, without hesitation. Darren watched the exchange without comment, storing it the way he stored everything else. Gareth stepped back, nodding once toward a distant stretch of shoreline. "That section over there looks solid until it isn't. Ice forms wrong. Wind gets under it." Darren followed his gaze, committing it to memory. Got it. Gareth gave a final nod, then turned toward his truck. Halfway there, he stopped. Not turning back, not raising his voice, just speaking into the space between them. People are going to come out here now, he said, because of what you did. Darren didn't answer. Gareth didn't wait. He got into the truck and drove off, the engine fading slowly until the sound dissolved into the distance and the lake reclaimed its quiet. Darren remained where he was, eyes resting on the place where the disturbance had been. Nothing moved now. Nothing shifted. Just the same wide stillness stretching out under the pale sky. Rex returned to his side, sitting close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Darren exhaled slowly, the cold air settling deep into his lungs. Something had changed again. Not outside. Inside. Not a decision. Not a realization. Just a small alignment, as if something long out of place had begun, quietly, to move back toward where it belonged. He hadn't come here to be part of anything. That had been the point. Distance, silence, absence. But now there were voices, footsteps, and men like Gareth who carried their own unfinished pieces into the same space. And somewhere between those pieces, something else had begun to form. Not visible, not defined, but present. Darren stayed there longer than he needed to, not because he was waiting for something to happen, but because for the first time in a long while, he wasn't trying to leave before it did. The lake did not look dangerous that morning, and that was what made it dangerous. It lay wide and pale under a washed-out sky, its surface holding just enough ice to appear trustworthy from a distance, while concealing the slow, shifting water beneath. Darren Cole stood at the edge of the porch, shoulders relaxed, but not loose, eyes tracing the familiar lines he had begun to memorize over the past few days. What had once been emptiness had become structure. The shoreline, the weak points in the ice, the path of the wind across the open water. Each detail had settled into his awareness like coordinates on a map he hadn't meant to draw. Rex stood beside him, closer than before, his body angled outward, scanning the same space with a different kind of understanding, one that didn't rely on logic but rarely failed. Darren had already checked the stakes he'd driven into the ground the day before. They stood firm, marking the safer edge of the lake in uneven intervals, their presence simple but deliberate. Someone might ignore them. Someone always did. But they were there now, and that mattered in ways he didn't try to explain to himself. He hadn't come here to protect anyone. He hadn't come here to be responsible for anything beyond his own breathing and the quiet weight of his own thoughts. And yet the markers were in place, the bridge reinforced, the shoreline watched. Action had come before intention. It always did. The sound reached him before the shape did. Not an engine this time. A voice, high, strained, too sharp for conversation. Darren didn't think. His body had already shifted before the second sound came, a short, broken cry that carried across the lake and fractured against the still air. Rex moved at the same moment, his posture tightening, ears forward, muscles aligning with a direction that Darren hadn't yet confirmed but already trusted. They moved together, across the snow, over the bridge, toward the far side where the shoreline curved inward and visibility dropped slightly behind a low ridge of frozen brush. Darren's pace was fast but controlled, each step placed with precision despite the urgency that pressed against his ribs. Rex was ahead now, not running blindly but moving with purpose, cutting angles, closing distance with a confidence that came from instinct, sharpened by experience. The scene revealed itself in pieces. A sled, tipped on its side. A scatter of supplies rope, a small tackle box, something wrapped in cloth, and a figure at the edge of the ice. A woman. She was kneeling, one leg half submerged where the ice had given way, her body leaning forward dangerously as she reached toward something just out of Darren's line of sight. Her coat, dark green, heavy, practical, was soaked along one side, the fabric stiffening already in the cold. Her hair, a deep brown threaded with early gray, had come loose from whatever tie had held it, strands clinging to her face and neck. She wasn't screaming anymore. She was focused, desperately focused. "Don't move," Darren called out, his voice cutting through the air with a command that didn't ask permission. She turned her head slightly. Her face was narrow, lined not with age alone but with years of strain, of holding things together longer than they should have been held. Her eyes, dark, sharp, met his for a split second, and in that moment Darren saw recognition. Not of him, of what he was. "Her foot," she said, breath breaking. "She's stuck." Darren moved closer, lowering his center of gravity instinctively as the ice beneath him began to creak in warning. Rex circled wide, positioning himself along a safer angle, his eyes fixed on the point where the woman's reach extended. Then Darren saw her. A smaller figure, half in the water, clinging to the edge of the broken ice. Nora. Her arms were locked rigid, fingers gripping the frozen surface with a strength that wouldn't last. Her lower body was submerged, the dark water pulling at her clothes, draining heat faster than she could fight it. Her face was pale, lips trembling, eyes wide, but not panicked, holding onto something that hadn't broken yet. Darren dropped to one knee. "Look at me," he said, his voice lower now, controlled, steady. Nora's eyes shifted to him. "Don't pull up. Just hold." He moved fast, but not rushed. The rope was already in his hands, unwound from his shoulder, secured behind him to a stable anchor point he had marked earlier without knowing why. He slid forward inch by inch, distributing his weight, ignoring the cold that seeped through his clothes as the ice pressed back against him. The woman Nora's mother had gone still now, not because she wasn't afraid, but because she understood that movement could end everything. "Back up," Darren told her quietly. She hesitated, then obeyed. Slowly, carefully. Trust without argument. Rex let out a low, sudden sound. Not a bark, not a growl, but something in between, sharp enough to cut through Darren's focus. For a fraction of a second, Darren's attention shifted, not to the woman, not to Nora, but to the water. Something moved beneath the surface, not rising, not breaking through, just passing. A shadow where there shouldn't have been one. Then it was gone, and the moment snapped back into place. Darren didn't allow himself to think about it. He reached Nora. "Wrap this," he said, guiding the rope toward her arms. Her fingers struggled to respond, numb, delayed, but she followed his instruction, looping the rope clumsily but securely enough. "Good," he said. "That's good." He pulled, not all at once, measured, steady. The rope tightened, cutting into his gloves as he shifted his weight backward, using his body instead of his arms. Rex moved in closer, pacing along the edge, eyes locked on Nora, as if willing her to move with the pull. The ice cracked. A sharp sound. Too close. Darren adjusted instantly, lowering further, redistributing his weight, continuing the pull without pause. Nora's body slid forward. Inches. Then more. Water released her slowly, reluctantly, as if it had already decided to keep her. But Darren didn't let it. He pulled again. And this time, she came free. He grabbed her under the arms and dragged her fully onto the ice, then back toward the safer ground beyond the break. Rex was there immediately, circling once before pressing close, his body radiating heat, his presence anchoring something that might have drifted otherwise. Nora coughed, hard, water spilling from her lips as her body tried to remember how to function. Darren didn't stop moving. He wrapped her in the cloth from the sled, then his own outer layer, hands working with practiced efficiency, checking her breathing, her responsiveness, her eyes. "You're okay," he said, though the words weren't reassurance, they were instruction. "Stay. Stay here." Her mother moved forward then, collapsing beside her, hands shaking as they hovered before finally touching, as if afraid she might break. She was in her early 40s, Darren realized now, her build lean but strong in the way of someone used to work rather than rest. Her face, though lined with strain, held something unyielding beneath it, a refusal to let things fall apart, even when they already had. "Thank you," she said, the words barely holding together. Darren didn't answer. He didn't know how to. They made it back to the house slowly, carefully, every step deliberate. Inside, the fire was already lit, the warmth building gradually as Darren settled Nora near it, replacing wet layers, monitoring her breathing, her color, the subtle signs that told him she was still fighting. Rex stayed close, closer than before. His head rested near her arm, eyes half-lidded but alert, as if guarding something fragile that had not yet fully returned. Time passed, not measured, just moving. Nora's breathing steadied. Color returned, faint at first, then stronger. Her eyes opened, focused, alive. Darren sat back against the wall, watching. Not as a soldier, not as a rescuer, just watching. Her mother looked at him again. Longer this time, not with gratitude, not only. With something else, recognition, the kind that didn't need words. "You didn't have to be here," she said quietly. Darren glanced toward the door, toward the lake beyond it, then back again. "No," he said, "but I was." The house did not feel the same after that day, though nothing in it had changed. The fire still burned in the same stone hearth, the walls still held the same quiet weight of old wood and colder seasons, and the lake outside still stretched wide and indifferent beneath a pale northern sky. But something had shifted, not in the structure, not in the land, but in the way Darren Cole moved through it. He noticed it in the small pauses that didn't used to exist, in the way his attention lingered longer than necessary, in the way silence no longer felt like something he needed to defend. Nora slept for most of the afternoon. Wrapped in dry layers, positioned close enough to the fire to regain warmth without overwhelming her system, she lay on the narrow bed Darren had built, her breathing steady now, though still deeper than usual, as if her body was catching up to something it had nearly lost. Rex remained near her, not hovering, not anxious, but present in that quiet, unwavering way he carried into everything that mattered. His head rested near the edge of the bed, eyes half open, watching without needing to move. Her mother sat nearby. Now that the urgency had passed, Darren could see her more clearly. Her name was Elise Bell. Early 40s, though the lines in her face suggested she had carried more years than that. She was tall for a woman in this region, with a lean, practical build shaped by work, rather than time spent caring about appearance. Her hair, dark brown with strands of gray beginning to show, was tied back again, though not as neatly as before. Her hands, he noticed those were rough, the skin worn at the knuckles, fingertips calloused. Someone who worked. Someone who fixed things because no one else would. She hadn't stopped watching Nora, even now. Even with the steady rise and fall of her daughter's breathing. As if looking away might undo it. Darren stood near the doorway, not intruding, not withdrawing, just occupying the space in between. That had become his place lately, between things. Between isolation and involvement. Between leaving and staying. "You've done this before," Elise said finally, her voice quiet but steady. Darren didn't look at her right away. His gaze stayed on the fire, watching the slow collapse of a burning log as it shifted into embers. Yes. Not a story, not an explanation, just truth. Elise nodded slightly, as if that was enough. It probably was. Outside, the day moved on without them. The light shifted slowly across the lake, shadows stretching, then softening again. Somewhere in the distance, a vehicle passed along the far road, its sound barely reaching the house before dissolving into the air. The world continued, unchanged by what had almost happened. But inside Aurora House, something held. Nora woke just before dusk. Not suddenly. Gradually. Her fingers moved first, a small twitch against the blanket, followed by a slow shift of her head. Her eyes opened a moment later, blinking against the dim light, searching for something familiar. Rex was the first thing she saw. The dog lifted his head immediately, ears tilting forward just slightly, his gaze softening in a way Darren had rarely seen. Nora's lips moved. "Hey," she whispered, voice rough but present. Rex didn't move closer. He didn't need to. His presence was already there. Elise leaned forward quickly, her hand finding Nora's shoulder, careful, controlled, but unable to hide the relief beneath it. "You're okay," she said, not as a question, as something she needed to make real. Nora looked at her, then past her. To Darren. For a second, something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or understanding that didn't require language. Darren gave a small nod. She held it for a moment, then closed her eyes again. Not from weakness, but from trust. Rex shifted suddenly, not sharply, not alarmed, but with intention. He stood, turned his head toward the door, and took 2 slow steps forward, his body aligning with something outside that no one else had acknowledged yet. Darren noticed immediately. His attention moved from Nora to the dog, then to the door. A second passed. Then a faint sound. Not the lake, not the wind. Footsteps. More than one. Approaching. Rex didn't bark. He simply stood there, waiting. Darren moved toward the door and opened it. The cold entered first, followed by the quiet presence of 3 figures standing just beyond the edge of the porch. At the front was Maeve Rowan, her posture as steady as ever, though her eyes carried a different weight now, something closer to certainty than curiosity. Behind her stood Harold Bennett, wrapped in layers that made him look smaller than he had the day before. His face still pale but alive, his movements careful, measured. And beside him, slightly behind, was another man Darren hadn't seen before. He was younger than Gareth, mid-30s maybe, tall but not broad, his frame built more for endurance than strength. His hair was dark, cut short but not military, and a trimmed beard lined his jaw, giving his face a sharper edge. His eyes moved quickly, taking in details, assessing without lingering too long on any one thing. He wore a sheriff's jacket, dark, practical, worn in places that suggested use rather than neglect. "Sheriff Owen Pike," he said, stepping forward slightly. His voice was calm, even, but carried the kind of authority that didn't need reinforcement. "Gareth's younger brother." Darren nodded once. Owen's gaze shifted briefly to Rex, then to the interior of the house, then back again. "Word travels fast out here," he added, "especially when people start coming back from places they usually don't." They didn't stay long. They didn't need to. Harold spoke first, his voice still carrying the weight of what he owed, but not forcing it into something larger than it was. "Just wanted to see that she's all right," he said, nodding toward Nora. Elise stepped forward, her posture straightening slightly, her voice quieter now, but stronger. "She is." Maeve watched the exchange without interrupting, her attention moving between the people in the room like someone keeping track of something larger than the moment itself. Owen remained still, observing, his presence less about involvement and more about understanding how all of this fit together. Darren said very little. He didn't need to. The space spoke for him. When they left, the house grew quiet again. But it wasn't the same quiet. It held something now. Not tension, not expectation. Something steadier. Nora slept again not long after, her breathing even, her body no longer fighting itself. Elise sat beside her. Not as rigid now, her shoulders lowering slightly, her hands finally resting instead of hovering. Rex returned to his place near the bed. Watching. Always watching. Darren stepped back toward the doorway, looking out at the lake one more time before the light disappeared completely. The surface lay still, untouched, giving nothing away. He understood that now. The lake didn't change for anyone, but people changed around it. He had come here to disappear. That had been the plan. To step out of the world, to let everything settle without him, to exist in a space where nothing asked anything of him anymore. But that wasn't what had happened. The lake had held him. The house had held him. And now, people did too. Not because he had chosen it, because he had stayed when it mattered. Darren exhaled slowly, the cold air settling into him, not as something sharp, but something steady. Behind him, the fire continued to burn. Rex remained at his post, and Nora slept, alive in a way she hadn't been just hours before. For the first time in a long while, Darren didn't feel like a man who had stepped away from his life. He felt like someone who had stepped back into it, without realizing when it had happened. There are moments in life when everything feels quiet, distant, and without purpose. We step away, believing we are done, believing the world no longer needs us. But sometimes, it is in that silence that something greater begins to work. Not loudly, not suddenly, but gently, patiently. God does not always call us through miracles that split the sky. Sometimes He calls us through small moments, through a life placed in front of us, through a choice that asks nothing but everything at the same time. A hand reaching out, a voice in the distance, a reason to stay when leaving would be easier. Darren did not come to the lake to become anything. He came to disappear. But God had already placed something there for him. Not a sign written in the clouds, but a purpose hidden inside ordinary moments, inside responsibility, inside courage, inside choosing to act when it mattered most. and maybe that is how it works for all of us. Maybe the miracle is not something that happens to us. Maybe the miracle is what happens through us. In our daily lives, we pass by people, moments, and choices that seem small, almost invisible. But each one carries the weight of something greater. A kind word, a helping hand, a decision to stay instead of turning away. These are not accidents. These are invitations. So if you are watching this and you feel lost or tired or unsure of your place in the world, remember this: you are not here by mistake. There is something only you can do, even if you cannot see it yet. And when the moment comes, you will know. If this story touched you, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might be the one someone else needs to hear. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder that they still matter. And if you believe in stories like this, subscribe to the channel so we can continue bringing you journeys that speak to the heart. May God watch over you, guide your steps, and give you strength in the moments that matter most. May He place light in your path when everything feels uncertain, and may you always find the courage to answer when life quietly calls your name.